Hello and very warm welcome at Amish Cycle 5858. I am Amish Cycle. Following news have been reported by American, European, Asian, African, Australian news channels and the news agencies. So please, let's go to the headlines.
Tonight, several developing stories as we come on the air. The stage is set for the White House talks on the war in Ukraine, and late word on who's joining the negotiations. A monster storm will impact millions on the East Coast, and a mass shooting in New York City. We're going to begin with the Ukraine peace talks. NATO and European leaders now planning to join Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky at the White House tomorrow. President Trump saying there's big progress and urging Americans to stay tuned. His special envoy claiming Russian President Vladimir Putin made a key concession. What this could mean for Ukraine's security as Zelensky demands an immediate ceasefire. Reports tonight from Ukraine and Washington. Hurricane Erin expected to intensify once again in the Atlantic. Millions on the East Coast could be impacted by waves topping 12 feet and dangerous rip currents. New Hampshire's lifeguards already making more than 140 rescues in 1 week. And the Midwest facing more severe storms. Giant hail reported and parts of Wisconsin flooded. Our weather team standing by to time it all out. The mass shooting at a New York City restaurant. 3 killed, 9 injured. Survivors rushed to hospitals. Tonight, the manhunt for the suspects. Hundreds more National Guard troops are being deployed to the nation's capital. They're being sent to join the Trump administration's crackdown on crime. But protests are growing, and a key Senate Democrat calls the deployment an abuse of power. Air Canada flights remain grounded, while many flight attendants are defying a government order to return to work, leaving up to 100,000 passengers stranded. 2 American tourists drowned at a new resort in the Bahamas. What we're learning as authorities investigate. A major freeway shut down for hours after a truck carrying 8 Teslas burst into flames. The lithium-ion battery sending toxic smoke high into the air. You'll remember Terrence Stamp, the British actor known for playing Hollywood's villains. And America Strong from Venice Beach to Virginia Beach. She skated across the U.S. for a special purpose.
From ABC News World Headquarters in New York, this is World News Tonight. This is not a war. The United States is not in a war. Ukraine is in a war. We happen to be in the role of the only country in the world, with the only leader in the world, that can actually bring Putin to a table to even discuss these things.
Welcome back, everybody. 19 minutes after the hour now. This is a Fox News alert. As you know, President Trump trying to broker yet another peace deal. But rather than applaud the push for peace, the far-left media is attacking the president.
I believe that the humiliation for the United States, the loss of credibility and reputation yesterday in Alaska was much worse than the Washington.
Putin got everything he wanted. I mean, first of all, he wanted that photo op, right?
But Vladimir Putin got out of this summit meeting not only the nice photo op on the red carpet and in the presidential limousine. What he got out of it was essentially a free pass to continue the war for an indefinite amount of time.
Chris Murphy is a walking soundbite for his party, never off message, no matter what happens. Now, what they do ignore clearly is that under the Biden administration, there was no end in sight for the war at all. But even as President Trump prepares to meet with Volodymyr Zelensky and European leaders tomorrow at the White House, at least there is some hope that maybe, just maybe, the war might end sometime soon. Katie, I mentioned Murphy because this is the thing about Democrats. If nothing else, they are disciplined. They stay on message. You rarely see anybody stray off the reservation because they know they have a talking point and they will run with that talking point no matter what. Even in spite of the fact that we're all out here, we can see with our own eyes, the president's trying to make something happen.
Yeah, the freak out over this from Democrats is just an indictment of their own failures when it comes to the politicians they supported and the issue of Ukraine. So Barack Obama loses Crimea under his watch to Russia. Putin invades and takes Crimea with Joe Biden as the vice president. Then you have Joe Biden with the Ukraine portfolio saying, NATO, they can't join NATO because Ukraine is too corrupt. Well, his family then goes and engages in the very corruption that's preventing Ukraine from joining NATO, which would have prevented them from being invaded by Russia. Then you have Putin invading when President Joe Biden comes into office, and we have this horrific war that's now lasting almost 4 years. They own all of that, whereas President Trump is the one, during his first term, who sent them javelins instead of blankets.
Yeah.
He's sending them negotiations instead of allowing Russia to continue leading Russians and Ukrainians to the slaughter by threatening Putin with sanctions that would continue to cripple his economy after he's already squeezed them on so many ways. India sanctions, the EU deal with $750 billion in energy that they buy from the United States. So they're freaking out because the president is getting results here, and they don't want to talk about their record when it comes to Russia and Ukraine because it's a very, very poor one that Putin is winning.
Especially if he can push this over the finish line, Anita. Any expectation for anything big this week? What do you think?
Well, I think, look, he got to a meeting, right?
Yeah, which was part of the good. That was the goal, right?
And to Katie's point, the last time. On this Sunday night, defying orders. Air Canada's flight attendants push on with their strike, rejecting government calls for binding arbitration.
The whole process has been unfair.
As travel plans for passengers remain in disarray. Pierre Poilievre prepares for a potential political comeback. The Alberta by-election to get him back to Parliament, while he has to fend off 200 other candidates first. And driving home a message.
My goal here today is just to impact one person.
A father wraps up 2 decades of calling on young drivers to get home safely.
Global National. Reporting tonight, Carolyn Jarvis.
At Canada's biggest airport and airports across the country today, Air Canada flight attendants defied a back-to-work order and continued to strike. It means hundreds of thousands of passengers are still stuck in limbo as the two sides are unable to reach a deal. Good evening, and thanks for joining us. Air Canada says it is canceling another 240 flights today and pushing its plans to resume operations until tomorrow night. The airline had planned to start flying again this afternoon after 10,000 flight attendants were ordered back to work by the federal government and the Industrial Relations Board. But the union says it is challenging that order. Heidi Petrachik is following the story for us from Halifax Airport tonight. Heidi.
यूके स्टडी करने जाना है, यूनिवर्सिटी ऑफर भी है, पर टेंशन है कि वीजा लगेगा या नहीं। ऊपर से सितंबर इनटेक भी एंड होने वाला है।
Carolyn, while the two sides remain at odds, tens of thousands of passengers are stuck in the middle, coming to airports like this one, trying to figure out how to get their travels back on track. California resident Wesley Murphy is in a hurry to get home for work and school after his maritime vacation, but it's not looking good.
The earliest flights they can get us on are the 23rd, but that leaves us here for a week.
Across the country and around the world, customers were already frustrated after flight attendants went on strike Saturday morning.
Oh, well, it's just rubbish because we should be sort of sightseeing right now, but we can't.
By Saturday afternoon, the federal labor minister directed the Industrial Relations Board to order binding arbitration. So it ordered employees back to work and operations to resume Sunday morning, but that was short-lived.
I got it on my app. It let me check in and then it's saying cancelled.
The union representing flight attendants said no.
Our members are not going back to work. We are saying no. The whole process has been unfair. Air Canada has really refused to bargain with us.
In a statement, Air Canada called the move illegal, writing
Africa News. The news.
Tensions between the Democratic Republic of Congo and Kenya flared up again this weekend. This after Kenyan President William Ruto on Friday announced the appointment of a consul general to the eastern Congolese city of Goma. It's been occupied for the past 7 months by the Congo River Alliance, which includes the M23 rebel group. Kinshasa has formally protested against what it described as Kenya's inappropriate decision. It says this amounts to disrespect for the country's territorial integrity and could appear to legitimize the group's occupation of the city. In addition, it says it was not officially contacted by the Kenyan authorities before making the announcement, as required by international law and diplomatic practice. Rwanda-backed M23 this year seized swathes of territory in the eastern DRC in its long-standing battle with the army. Following its territorial gains, it's attempted to establish a parallel government as part of the Congo River Alliance. It claims it's freeing the region from what it alleges is misrule by Kinshasa. The M23 is one of many rebel groups attempting to gain control over the mineral-rich eastern region.
South Africa is launching a sweeping national dialogue to confront the country's biggest challenges, including poverty, inequality, corruption, and an unemployment rate above 30%. The two-day convention in Pretoria marks the start of what President Cyril Ramaphosa calls a soul-searching process involving civic groups, political parties, and ordinary citizens. It follows the ANC's loss of its parliamentary majority in the 2024 election, which led to the formation of a coalition government. Ramaphosa says the talks are meant to be inclusive and led by the people. He's appointed an eminent persons group made up of respected figures such as rugby captain Siya Kalosi, actor John Carney, and former judge Edwin Cameron. The initiative has faced criticism. The Democratic Alliance withdrew after a political dispute and called the talks a waste of public funds. The AK party is also refusing to participate. There are concerns over the estimated $40 million cost, and some accuse the ANC of using the dialogue to boost its image ahead of local elections. The dialogue will continue in phases across all 9 provinces, with another convention likely early next year.
Returning to Moscow following his Alaska summit with US President Donald Trump, Russian President Vladimir Putin reported back to his top officials, describing the talks as frank and informative. I would like to immediately note that the visit to the US was timely and very useful. We discussed practically all areas of our interaction, but first of all, of course, we talked about the possible resolution of the Ukrainian crisis on a fair basis. And of course, we had the opportunity to talk about the genesis, the cause of this crisis, which we did. Is precisely the elimination of these root causes that should be the basis for the settlement. Putin claims Russia invaded Ukraine because it's a security threat to his country. At the talks, Trump failed to secure Putin's agreement to end the war by effectively handing him recognition on the international stage. I repeat once again, there was an opportunity to once again state our position calmly and in detail. Of course, we respect the position of the American administration, which sees the need for a speedy end to hostilities. Well, we would also like this and would also like to move on to resolving all issues by peaceful means. The conversation with President Trump was very frank, informative, and, in my opinion, brings us closer to the necessary solutions. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is due to meet with Trump in Washington on Monday to discuss a possible settlement of the war. Dozens of people holding any form of container they can find scramble to get some rice or lentils at a makeshift charity kitchen in Gaza City. Amidst severe hunger and food shortages, it's their only hope of getting something to eat for their hungry families. I come here at 6 in the morning to get food for my children, and if I don't get any now, I'll have to wait until the afternoon or sunset for another chance. My children are surviving on the small amount of lentils or rice that we get here. I hope that God will help me get something. My children haven't eaten bread or any breakfast. They're waiting for me to leave with what I get. The United Nations is warning that levels of starvation and malnutrition in Gaza are at their highest level since the war began. Had it not been for God and the charity kitchens, we would starve to death. We come here at 8 in the morning and struggle to get lentils or rice. We suffer a lot when we leave at 11 or 12 to walk for about a kilometre. Had it not been for charity and God, we would not survive. Faced with growing international pressure, Israel allowed the flow of aid to resume in May. But the UN says the amount is a fraction of what is needed and deliveries continue to face delays. Gaza officials say 251 people, including 108 children, have now died from starvation.
Tonight, a united front from overseas. Leaders on the way to Washington as we speak, pushing for peace in Ukraine. Just hours from now, President Trump set to meet with Ukraine's president after Friday's summit with Russia. And now, multiple key European heads of state heading to the White House for backup tomorrow. Can they avoid the kind of confrontation we saw 6 months ago in the Oval Office? We've got the late developments. 2 American cruise passengers drowning in separate incidents at a new resort in the Bahamas. The latest on the investigation. Take a look at this. Divers rescue caught in waves from Hurricane Erin. The storm weakening overnight, but it could get stronger soon. The latest track and the impact to the East Coast. The search for suspects after a deadly shooting at a Brooklyn nightclub. 3 people killed, several more hurt. We'll take you live to the scene. Caught on camera, dramatic moments as masked federal agents surround a car. Windows smashed and then shots fired. What we're learning about the violent confrontation. And there's good news tonight. Potlucks for total strangers coming together and sharing much more than food.
This is NBC Nightly News with Hallie Jackson.
Good evening. We begin tonight with the world watching the White House and world leaders set to descend on Washington.
Tonight, diplomatic show of force. I'm here tomorrow to keep Zelensky from being bullied.
European leaders rallied to Ukraine, joining President Zelensky at Monday's meeting with President Trump. Their united front against Russia, with Ukraine's future at stake. The first Oval Office sit-down since this confrontation.
You don't have the cards right now. I'm Willie James and been at the White House where this weekend President Trump breaks with allies to back Vladimir Putin's plan to end the war.
Also tonight, taking to the streets.
I'm Deborah Patter in London. Tonight, one of the largest anti-war protests in Israel since the conflict in Gaza began.
Powerful storm.
I'm Ali Bauman in New York City with Hurricane Erin ready to whip up dangerous surf and life-threatening conditions along the East Coast.
I'm meteorologist Andrew Kozak tracking Erin on its path and the potential for empowering.
Foodflation. Americans feeling the pinch.
I'm Lisa Rosner in New York, where grocery shoppers tell us everything from canned goods to corn is stretching their wallets.
And later, it's the summer of sequels, decades in the making. So why all the reboots and remakes?
I'm Andres Gutierrez in Los Angeles. Hollywood taps into nostalgia to fill theater seats.
This is the CBS Weekend News from New York with Jerika Duncan.
Tonight on PBS News Weekend, European leaders will join Volodymyr Zelensky for tomorrow's high-stakes Oval Office meeting to present a united front. Then how trouble getting a good night's sleep has become a public health emergency. And one man's quest to capture dazzling images of fireflies and raise awareness about the threats facing these glowing symbols of summer.
I stumbled upon a forest with billions and billions of fireflies synchronizing their flashes across vast expanses of the forest, and there's been no looking back.
It's crunch time as Ukraine's future hangs in the balance.
Sir Keir Starmer and other European leaders swarmed to Washington ahead of the Ukraine-Russia peace talks to urge President Trump not to cave in to Vladimir Putin's demands.
Now this comes after Russia's apparent success at last week's Alaska summit, which reportedly led to President Trump considering having Ukraine give up regions.
The support from other leaders would also aim to stop the Ukrainian president from having a confrontation like the last time that he was in the Oval Office.
Gambling with World War III. And what you're doing is very disrespectful to the country, this country. That's back to you far more than a lot of people said they should have.
In other news, the last orders for the pub. More than 200 have permanently shut in the last 6 months. Apparently it's due to rising taxes and labour costs.
And the name's Bond, James Bond, but does 007 have to be a man? We're going to be debating that later on in the programme.
Skippity. Skippity-doo. Trad wife. They're not real words, well, except they are now, because whether they make sense to you or not, they're the latest additions to the Cambridge Dictionary, and we'll be getting to the bottom of what they mean later in the programme.
Skippy.
I'd like to pretend that I know, but I haven't finished that. In sport this morning, Arsenal won at Manchester United with a scrappy corner, while a rule that nobody seemed to know about stopped Crystal Palace from winning at Chelsea. Scotland's Bob McIntyre said he wants to go and smash up his golf clubs after buying a 4-shot lead at the BMW Championship. And in tennis, the Raducanu Alcaraz US Open mixed doubles dream team could be in doubt before a season began.
The week ahead will be cloudier and cooler than compared to last week, but will there be any rain where you live? Find out in the full forecast coming up.
Well, hello there, you're very welcome on this Monday morning. I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Penny Smith, and this is GB News Breakfast.
It's 24.com.
Good morning, I'm Oliver Farry, and this is Daybreak. Volodymyr Zelensky strikes a positive note ahead of his trip to Washington, saying the Trump administration's offer of security guarantees are historic. Zelensky will be accompanied by a raft of European leaders on his visit, which stands to be quite different from his last one to the Oval Office in February. Bolivia's presidential election looks set for a second-round runoff as centre-right candidate Rodrigo Paz tops the poll with 32% of the vote, ahead of right-wing former President Jorge Quiroga. The election brings an end to left-wing rule in the landlocked South American country after 19 years. Protests and a one-day strike in Israel as demonstrators call for an end to the war in Gaza and for the remaining hostages to be returned home. But Benjamin Netanyahu and his far-right government allies stand firm, saying the protesters are emboldening Hamas.
September 2nd on DW.
This is DW News, and these are our top stories. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has called the US decision to offer security guarantees for Ukraine historic. On Monday, he travels to Washington to meet with President Donald Trump. Several European leaders will join him. They're aiming to present a united front to counter Russia's efforts to impose its own terms to end its war on Ukraine. Hundreds of thousands of Israelis have joined protests to demand their government secure a hostage deal and end the war in Gaza. 50 Israelis are still being held by militant groups in Gaza. Frustration is growing in Israel over the government's plans to widen the war. Israel's security cabinet gave its backing to an expanded offensive earlier this month. Exit polls show centrist Senator Rodrigo Paz leading the first round of Bolivia's presidential election. He's set to face conservative former President Jorge Quiroga, known as Tuto, in a second round in October. Polls suggest Bolivia will have its first right-wing parliament in decades. This is DW News from Berlin. You'll find much more on our website at dw.com.
Very good morning to you. It is
6 o'clock, the Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer flies to Washington this morning for crunch talks over the future of Ukraine.
He'll meet President Trump at the White House, along with 5 other European leaders and the head of NATO, in an extraordinary show of support for Ukraine's President Zelensky.
It's Monday the 18th of August. Your headlines. President Zelensky lands in Washington for today's emergency summit at the White House, but Donald Trump tells him there's no going into NATO. European leaders say the US must offer a guarantee that they'll step in if Russia strikes again. Also ahead, the son of Hong Kong democracy activist Jimmy Lai tells Sky News his father will most likely die in jail unless the UK intervenes. Plus,
these humans are beginning to bore me.
Tributes are paid to film icon and Superman star Terence Stamp, once dubbed the world's most beautiful man. And in sport, Arsenal beat Manchester United 1-0 at Old Trafford on the opening weekend of the new season. Very good morning to you. What happens in the coming hours could decide the future of
This recollection of the ABC Listen app.
Today, Qantas responds after being fined $90 million for unlawfully sacking 1,800 staff during the pandemic. The Prime Minister weighs in on Ukraine in a call with European leaders ahead of their trip to the White House.
Ukraine must, of course, not have a solution imposed on it. They need to be a part of those negotiations.
Tasmanian Labor fails to secure Green support for a no-confidence motion in Jeremy Rockliff's Liberal government. And the government promises this week's Productivity Roundtable will canvass ways to slash red tape. Hello and welcome to ABC News. I'm Catherine Robinson. Airline giant Qantas has been ordered to pay a $90 million penalty for the illegal outsourcing of workers during the COVID pandemic. Jobs at 10 airports, including baggage handlers and cleaners, were outsourced in 2020 as the airline faced a dramatic decline in business. It resulted in the illegal sacking of 1,800 Qantas workers. Federal Court Judge Justice Michael Lee says the legal actions of Qantas delayed compensation for illegally sacked workers. He said he wants to achieve a real deterrence for large companies.
I accept Qantas as sorry. This is Asia Now.
It's 12 p.m. in Singapore and Hong Kong, 9:30 in New Delhi and 11 o'clock in Jakarta. I'm Paul Soon. At this hour, China's chocolate diplomat Wang Yi heads to New Delhi for talks with Indian leaders, the first since the border clash in 2020. The meeting sparks a cautious return to dialogue and paved the way for Prime Minister Narendra Modi's high-stakes visit to Beijing next week. US President Donald Trump has urged Ukraine to reach a negotiated settlement with Russia, which includes giving up Crimea and Kyiv's NATO aspirations. Both leaders are set to meet later today for face-to-face talks, with European leaders joining them in a show of unity. Singapore's key exports fell 4.6% on year in July, reversing the surge seen in the previous month. Shipments to the country's largest export market, the US, plunged more than 40%.
Thank you for watching Amish Shakil 5858. I am Amish Shakil. I hope you will visit again. Have a good life. Bye-bye.